Hello and welcome to another Real Retirement Stories podcast. Today we're having an advisor edition in which I interview an advisor who has some interesting stories to share about some clients. And let me tell you, these two stories we're going to hear are quite interesting. One of them is going to be about how a car accident with a very young driver totally derailed one couple's retirement and threw them for quite the loop. And the other story, which is sensational, is about a client whose elderly day trading uh, father, who is in a nursing home, is not only hurting the finances, and the daughter's trying to help using powers of attorney, but it's not only is it not working, it seems like she might actually be disinherited from her father's will. So we're going to talk about both of these stories. And let me introduce today's storyteller and advisor, Ken Wink. Ken, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming. And before we get into these stories, which I'm very excited to hear, please introduce yourselves to the listening audience.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Dan, and an honor to be on the air with a podcasting OG like yourself. I always see at the different top financial advisor conferences across the country, and it's great to connect professionally with you.
I love
Uh,
it.
yeah, so I've been in the industry for 25 years. We are based in Sterling Heights, Michigan. I am married for, I don't want to get in trouble here, 16 years to my wife, Nicole. And I've got two kids. Charlotte's 13. Jack is 10. I went to Michigan State, graduated with honors with a finance degree. But Dan, despite all my efforts in education, as soon as my daughter turned 13 years old, she magically got smarter than me and my wife. So
Oh, yes.
we're in full teenager mode over here. You know, it's
Well, it doesn't get better. My oldest is now going to be 19 today or tomorrow, and
wow.
he still knows a lot more than me, but
Man,
not as much as the 16-year-old boys I have. They know more than everybody.
I appreciate you having me on the show and not her. It's
Well, don't catch your chickens before they hatch. We'll see.
yeah,
She might already be on the schedule for the future.
yeah.
So, Ken, you have some great stories. I want you to tell them however you think is best, but let's start first with this one about the car accident. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a bummer of a story, but I think it's really important for people to hear these kinds of things because it's the kind of thing you don't want to happen to you. So in this case, we want to make sure that all of our clients and viewers have the right amount of coverage when it comes to their auto and really also your homeowner's insurance policy. So a lot of people just shop for price, right? I mean, that's all you see when you go online or watch these TV commercials. Got the Super Bowl coming up here. Um, shop for price, price, price. But the coverage amounts are really important. There's so many line items. A lot of people don't realize what all that stuff means. So we're just going to focus in on one area today. So here's the story with my client. A 20-year-old is driving a little bit too fast for the weather, and a deer runs out in the road in front of the car that's in front of him. So this 20-year-old driver, who's not my client, has a decision to make. So he can rear end the car in front of him, or he can drive into a ditch. And this is a really big ditch. So he's probably thinking, if I go into that ditch, I'm going to be very seriously injured. So he decides to go into oncoming traffic and just hope that nobody's there. Unfortunately, my clients were driving on the other side of the road. Um, it was unfortunately a tragic accident. The wife did pass away from her injuries a couple weeks after the accident. So real bummer of a situation. They were really
Wow.
great clients, the kindest lady, and there were people were literally crying in my office because we were getting this lady ready for retirement and had so many meetings. And it's one of those stories where it's like almost got there, but she didn't actually get to enjoy her retirement just because of this car accident. So now the lawyers are getting involved, right? So
Yes.
this 20-year-old only has $100,000 of liability coverage on his auto insurance. So again, most people don't look at this, and especially when you're in your 20s and 30s, and you don't maybe have a ton of assets, people especially aren't paying attention to it. So liability coverage is what your insurance company will pay if you're in an accident and you hurt somebody. Um, so what we're focusing on today, though, is what's called uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage. So that is what you and all of our clients should be looking at. Underinsured or uninsured motorist protects you in case you're injured by somebody else who doesn't have good insurance. A lot of drunk drivers don't even have insurance, like they can't afford to have insurance anymore.
That's right.
So that's a perfect example where you want to have an appropriate amount of uninsured or underinsured motorist. So we normally recommend our clients have at least $500,000 of uninsured motorist just in case you're in an accident, so that if you can't sue the other person, at least you can get something. So in that case, you're actually suing your own insurance company. But that was sort of the tough part about this situation was they're only getting $100,000 from the 20-year-old driver. They did have a $250,000 of uninsured motorist on their own policy, but the wife was an executive. She was right at the end of her career. She was making $400,000 a year. So the very, very best they can do on this is 350,000, and then we've got court costs and attorney fees. So,
And I suppose they could theoretically go after the 20-year-old for assets that are most likely not non-existent for a 20-year-old.
can't get blood from a stone.
Oh, wow, Ken. So now was the husband in the car with her when this happened?
He was seriously injured as well.
Wow.
So he's walking with a cane and just trying to sort of pick up the pieces at this point. So um, uh, thank God in their case they had saved appropriately, and he's going to be okay financially. I think when the dust settles, but when you talk about the value of a human life in general, how do you put a price tag on that? Unfortunately, that's what these insurance companies do. So we've got to
Yeah.
make sure that our listeners are protected and have an appropriate amount of coverage just in case something unfortunate happens to them. Maybe it's, we hope it's never death, right? Maybe it's just an injury and you can't work for a period of time. You got to make sure that you've got enough coverage to take care of your affairs if you can't work anymore.
I would say there's two lessons I'm pulling from this story. The one first being that um, I got to teach my kids when they're driving, and I have, but now I got to really stress this. If you're driving and the deer or animal comes up, just hit it. Don't swerve into oncoming traffic. That's just not a good idea. But it's instinctual. You want to avoid hitting, and you think you could do it because they play video games where they could do it. The
Right.
second lesson, and probably the more practical one for those that are listening to this podcast, is consider uninsured motorist insurance. As financial planners, we're covering a lot of bases. You and I both have that philosophy of comprehensive. And that's one of those things we talk about as insurance coverage. And it's often missed that uninsured motorist, that's a real biggie. There's a lot of people in Florida that drive without licenses. There aren't even citizens or don't have insurance, and you got to rely on your own. So it's an expense though. That's a tough expense
It
to pay
is.
extra, for someone else's lack of planning. So,
Yeah, I can't
whew,
speak for Florida, but in Michigan, it's usually like 50 or $60 a year to go from 50,000 or 100,000 of uninsured motorist up to 250 or 500. Like obviously it depends upon age and everything, but I had a client tell me the other day, that's literally the cost of one DoorDash, or that's literally
yes.
lately that's one trip to McDonald's. The prices have gone up
Right,
so much.
right.
Like,
But you don't want to think about it. But I'm glad you brought that story up because that's tragic. And hopefully someone else might spark some protection for themselves. Okay. Thank you for that.
yeah.
Excellent
Yeah.
story. Now, not a great story. It's sad, but excellent lesson there. Well, let's get on to this other one now. This is it's a different line of thinking, but this one's about your clients whose parent is having some issues. Why don't you tell us what's going on here?
So I've got this client, Scott, and I don't think in his entire life by the way, the name has been changed to protect the innocent. But
So
most
totally, I
people,
agree.
yep, yep. So when most people create their estate planning documents, they just, typically will trust the attorney 100%. But some documents, especially older documents, they've got rules built into when these documents are going to get kicked into effect, and that's commonly called springing versus non-springing documents. So neither of us are attorneys. We're not providing legal advice today, but really good topic of conversation to have with an estate planning attorney, and we both have teams of attorneys that we can refer people to. um, but yeah, that's sort of the centerpiece of the story is, do you have springing or non-springing? And let me tell you how bad things can be if you have springing. Uh, so my client is 65 years old and he's been married for 40 years and he's got a father-in-law. So the father-in-law is the centerpiece of the story. And sometimes Dan in-laws are the center of the story in marriage, as we all know.
I'm not going to comment at all. My wife does watch the podcast, and her parents do too. So I have
Yeah.
a great positive experience only. So I know not what you speak of.
Yeah, I've got great in-laws as well, but my wife does not listen to the podcast, so we're just speaking freely. No, um, so this father-in-law, he's accumulated a nice estate. He's worth $2.5 million. He's very sharp. He's a former engineer, but he built it up, and this is an important point. He built it up with a moderate portfolio. So he was not high risk. He was not taking big chances. He was very deliberate when it came to his savings. I was told he set aside 15% of his paycheck throughout all of his working years for retirement. So he's sort of doing it slow and steady, wins the race, but being a good saver.
Okay.
So he's
Typical engineer.
typical engineer, man. Yep. So
Yeah.
the father-in-law breaks his hip in his late 80s and he has to move in with Scott and his wife. And he actually lives there for years. So they nurse him back to health. They're cooking for him. They're helping him with his medication. They're even helping him like get washed up and bathing. Like they are all in. They're full-time caregivers. Um, anytime a man helps wash another man, I don't know, you're
It's
like,
tough.
you're,
Now, are they retired? Your clients retired?
yes, yeah.
Okay, so they have the time to do that. Well, theoretically, probably not their ideal retirement, but
Not what they envisioned, but
okay.
they're close, right? And
Yeah.
this father-in-law is forever grateful to Scott for this care that he's provided, letting him move into their home and taking care of literally all of his wants and needs. So things are going good, but then eventually his mental abilities start to decline and he's starting to show some signs of dementia. And it just becomes too much for Scott and his wife to handle anymore. The father-in-law is getting forgetful. He's not acting like himself. And then I'm sure you've seen this from time to time with dementia. Sometimes people get a little bit grouchy and
Yeah.
borderline
Yeah.
abusive when
Yes.
they're struggling through dementia. So they're fighting them on medication and just so they move them into an assisted living facility / nursing home.
Okay.
And things start out fine. Eventually the father-in-law is making some friends and he's not hating it too much. But
Okay.
here's
That's
where the
good.
story takes a turn for the worse. And that is that the father-in-law starts making some friends at the nursing home and they're sort of bad influences. So one of the guys that he meets likes to day trade stocks. He presents himself as a big investor and he's made all kinds of money. So he takes the father-in-law under his wing and is going to start teaching him how to invest. So the father-in-law is not high risk his entire life, but all of a sudden he thinks he's the Wolf of Wall Street and he's day trading. He's trading an
Like
option.
literally day trading, like we're talking buying and selling within minutes or intraday.
Yes, and using options. So
And
one of the greatest ways to lose money in a hurry potentially is
wow.
investing in options and not knowing 100% what you're doing. So it doesn't go well as we would have guessed. So the father-in-law starts losing hundreds of thousands of dollars every month, and Scott and his wife do not know what to do. It's her dad's money. He worked for it. He saved it.
Right. Right.
But they know firsthand he's not in his best state of mind right now. This is completely out of character for him. So they see the statements. He's losing tons of money. They try to talk to him about it and ask him to stop. He won't stop. He's having a ball. Um, so they know he probably has dementia and all these mood changes and not typical investment behavior. So one fix that they tried to do was they updated the address on the brokerage statements, because he's doing a lot of it through the phone. I mean, some of it's online, but they just figured, we'll change the brokerage statement so they come to us rather than the assisted living facility. They figured it might help. So he noticed the father-in-law and got really mad. So he was so
Okay.
mad that he decided to call an estate planning attorney right away. And his goal was to write his daughter and his son-in-law out of his estate planning documents.
Oh
She is
boy.
an only child. This is the only son-in-law. They took care of him. All of that basically went out the window. He's updating his will and trust. To
So
basically
did
push
he
everything.
have the legal documents before going into the nursing facility?
Yes. So that's an important point. So when it comes to estate planning documents, the important document at this point would have been power of attorney. So he did have a power of attorney document in place, and it did name his own daughter and my client Scott as the people that would be in charge of his finances if he was incapacitated. So they naturally tried to, especially once it's starting to get tough here, where they're getting written out of the will. They know this is not him and not what he really wants. 2 years ago, him wouldn't have wanted this. That's for sure.
Right.
So in a springing document like a power of attorney for finance, you need to have two doctors sign off and say that you're incapacitated before your designates can take over things. Well, they're going around trying to get doctors to say, hey, he's suffering from dementia. He should be incapacitated. He's ruining all this money. And the doctors are coming back saying, he's day trading stocks. He seems fine to me.
Well, have you seen the statements?
Yes, exactly. So yeah, they're in a
Wow.
tough pickle, because not only are they not allowed to take over and try and stop the bleeding, but they can't get a doctor to sign off to let them take over. So, last time I checked in with Scott, about half of the money was gone, and the case was just getting tied up with attorney, arguments, and everybody's now spending money on attorneys. So now we're
Oh no.
even more money. So, I think the bottom line or the takeaway is, and again, we're not attorneys, but you have to really make a important decision when you decide whether you want to do springing or non-springing. So with springing, two doctors have to sign off saying you're completely incapacitated before that next person in line takes over. Non-springing means it's in effect right now. So whoever you designate, you've got to trust them 100%, because they could just walk in and take over your finances without two doctors signing off. So it's an important decision that everyone's got to make. In a lot of cases, we
Wow.
recommend doing the non-springing, because that would have avoided this whole mess.
Wow. I can't believe I can believe it. But so he's trading by the phone. I used to be a day trader before a long time ago. And I learned the secret to making a small fortune day trading is to start with a really large fortune and trade your way down to a small fortune. And it sounds like he's following that guidance. What an amazing story. So how did they find out that this was actually happening? How did they first learn that their father was losing money trading?
It started out with him bragging, saying, I'm day trading stocks now. I've learned from these
Wow.
guys, and they had obviously some apprehension, right from the get go. But
Yeah.
eventually, they were coming to visit him and saw some of his mail and some of the statements that were sitting out, and then they almost fell out of their chair.
And so they thought, okay, I got power of attorney. I'm going to stop this now. Let's change the account. Let's call up the company and block trading and say no more. Dad's not himself. And that didn't work because they didn't have the proper power of attorney at that time. They still don't.
No, they still don't.
Wow. So I get your point. It's good to have that But then your other point was you got to trust them, because theoretically, I could see the reverse happening. You name your son as the power of attorney, and you're living your life in retirement. Next thing you know, you see you've lost 30% in your account, and you find out your son's been day trading because he's got power of attorney on your account.
Exactly.
So where do you do? What do you do?
It's a
This
tough
is the life of
decision.
a financial advisor. That's, again, comprehensive. We have to cover all bases, and this is definitely one of them.
Yeah,
Wow.
I mean, there's so many potential scenarios that could run into problems. You know, you just if you do designate someone without the two doctors signing off, yeah, you got to trust them 100%. And you know, I mean, the alternative, I guess, would be if you really trust them 100%, just like when it comes to the finances or like your day trading example, like you can add people onto your account and then they have full power immediately. But then what happens if your son or daughter? So you know, that's a workaround all these documents as well. Let's just add our kids onto our investment accounts or onto our bank accounts. But if they got addicted to drugs or they got sued,
Yeah.
I've heard of cases where somebody goes through a divorce and then that ex son-in-law that you hate goes after your bank account because your daughter is part owner of your bank account, and the
Yes.
son-in-law's
Yeah,
really
you don't wanna, right, you don't wanna necessarily gift assets while you're alive, because you lose step up. So, wow, this is a tragic story now for the daughter who, trying to help dad, did help dad, right?
it did everything.
Jeez, what a
Yeah,
and now they've upset him. So, and so you think he's gonna write them out of the will because
he's
they
trying.
don't like his day trading ways.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard day trading's addicting, but
But
it's
best case scenario, he comes to his senses. He'll probably come to his senses when he loses all his money and has no more money to trade and can't afford the living situation, and then says, "Oh, I should never done that. Keep you as my in my inheritance." Worst case scenario, he does really well and writes them out of the will and says, "I told you so." No, that wouldn't even be the worst. The worst is he loses money and gets angry at them for trying to stop him.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, it is a mess. So
What do
yes,
you think's going to happen?
gosh, I think that they are not going to let him do the estate planning documents if I was going to guess, because I just have a hard time an attorney. It just seems like a court challenge waiting to happen. Um, you know, if that, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I know we have attorney clients. I don't want to upset them, but sometimes everybody likes making a buck too. So I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe they
that's
will
true.
try to
I
go.
mean, this could be the case where it's like, "Hey, doctor, here's what's happening." You have to be upfront with the doctor, but then he's not going to go see that doctor, right? There's doctor privilege. That's a tough one. And I think this is going to be something that we see more and more as our clients are aging and as our clients' parents are aging. There's going to be a dynamic of legality. This is why both of us are big proponents of estate planning, making sure you get it done and making sure you're dealing with an attorney and just doing the documents. My job is to make sure people are doing the documentation and make sure they have a plan, because the alternative is just terrible. At least they thought this through. They just messed up on the type of documentation. Uh,
Yeah.
wow, this is
I and they thought they had
quite
all their
interesting,
ducks
though.
in a row. You know, they thought, "Okay, great.
Right?
Got this trust in order, and we've got our power of attorney and patient advocate, and everything's just gonna go perfect." But, um, sometimes these things happen. So, yeah, and this is another great reason why it's good to revisit the documents and review them and
Yes.
just make sure that
Yes.
everybody's on the same page. In his while he was being cared for in the house, and he appreciated everything they were doing before the dementia set in, he might have said, "Yeah, let's give you guys full power of attorney right now. We don't need
Yes.
those 2 doctors.
Right.
You guys are my everything." Um, so yeah, just sometimes
Man,
things
it's too late now. It's too
it
late
is.
now. And it's the same with the first story. "Oh, I got insurance. I have auto coverage. I got enough." Well, what about the uninsured motorist, which you didn't see coming, like, literally, and you just don't think those things through. What about, does this cover if my dad flips a switch and loses his mental faculties? When does it, or what if it's a gray area?
Right.
Definitely very, very interesting points to make. I'm glad you shared those stories.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts you have on these stories and lessons that we can learn from the trials and tribulations of our clients?
Yeah, the main thing is just make sure I would recommend that everyone meet with a fiduciary advisor that is required to look out for their best interests and just give everything a once over and then absolutely keep updating it. Don't just set it and forget it. People change, people's faculties can decline, your net worth can increase, so you might need more insurance. It's just good to get check-ins regularly and make sure everything is still appropriate and on point.
Yeah. And I would add to that saying, don't get complacent, and also don't trade options. It's really an easy way to make a tough living, right?
Gosh, yeah, I
Just
I I don't have the stat handy, but I thought it was like 95% of options expire worthless. Like,
yes.
it is tough to make money in options.
When I was a day trader, I think the stat was 98 or 99% of those of us that were in that group, that training group, were going to fail. Just understood. So if you're really good at it, you'll be fine. But if you're not, you're going to fail and fail miserably. And that's a lesson. Just don't let your friends or your parents day trade. Ken,
Yep, good advice.
thanks again. Thanks again for great stories, and I appreciate you sharing this. Hopefully, you'll come up with a new one. We'll have you back on and tell another story. And I appreciate you, listeners. If you guys have a question or you want to learn a little bit more about Ken, again, where you're in Sterling, you said?
Sterling Heights, Michigan,
Sterling Heights. Where is that? I don't even know where that is.
we're about a half an hour north of Detroit in the suburbs.
Okay. Okay.
So, yeah,
So a
like
suburb of Detroit.
yeah, the big 3, automotive, they're just plants and engineering firms absolutely everywhere around us. So that
Got it.
they call it Automotive Alley.
Perfect. Love to hear your comments. Give us a like, ask a question below, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch everyone on the next Real Retirement Story.